Dahir is an 18-year-old Somali-American Muslim from South Salt Lake City who came to U.S. as a child refugee. She is a former UNICEF Youth Representative, Gifford Courage Fellow, and ACLU intern. Saida works on a variety of issues, including immigration reform, police accountability, and immigration rights. She is a published poet and released her debut spoken word album, The Walking Stereotype, earlier this year. She has been featured on publications like the Grammys, NPR, BBC World, and more for her poetry and activism. Saida is a first-year majoring in media studies with a focus in journalism and the Arabic language at the University of California, Berkeley, and aspires to use her degree to make the world a better place. Our second guest tonight is Karina Popovich. Karina is a young woman pursuing a career at the intersection of business and engineering. She has a blazing curiosity for all things tech while focusing her energy on bridging the STEM education gap among underrepresented groups. Karina is currently studying at the Dyson School of Business at Cornell University, running a clothing company that has revolutionized 3D printing education, and creating a clothing line to inspire girls in STEM and leadership to feel confident and empowered every day. Some of Karina's accomplishments include starting a global organization that brings STEM education and handmade computers to schools in underdeveloped countries like Tanzania, Venezuela, and Nepal. She worked at NYU's Tandon's Microflow Reactor Lab, where she published a research paper on machine learning and microreactors in the Computer and Chemical Engineering Journal. She started an elementary school robotics team and year-round after-school program in an underserved community in her neighborhood, Brooklyn, New York. Karina has been recognized by the Malala Fund, NCWIT, Amazon Future Engineer Scholarship, and KPMG Future Leaders. And our last guest tonight is Jamie Margolin, and she's a 17-year-old Colombian-American writer, community organizer, activist, and public speaker. She is the founder and co-executive director of an international youth climate justice movement called 0 Hour that led the very first youth climate march in Washington, D.C., and 25 other cities all around the world during the summer of 2018. She is also a plaintiff on our Children's Trust Youth versus Government of Washington state lawsuit, suing the state of Washington for denying her generation's constitutional rights to a livable environment by continuing to make climate change worse. And she is a climate justice organizer in her local Seattle community. Her debut book, Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It, is hitting bookstores worldwide in 2020. So please join me in welcoming these three young women to our stage. Okay, so to begin with, we'd like to have each of the panelists take 3 to 5 minutes to talk a little bit more in depth about what the work that they do. Who should we start with?
Let's start with Jamie.
Jamie.
Hola a todos, hi everyone.
Yep.
Okay. Hola a todos, hi everyone. My name is Jamie Margolin. I'm actually 18. And yeah, like my introduction said, I'm a youth climate justice activist. I started my work when I was about 14 years old, living in Seattle during the 2016 elections, and really being disturbed by what I saw on my television screen and taking my concern into volunteering for a local Democratic campaign headquarters and doing a lot of organizing and mobilizing and voter turnout in my community. The election didn't go the way I wanted it to, and so I switched my organizing to doing local grassroots community organizing in my city of Seattle for climate justice. And I was doing that work, running around Seattle, around the state capital of Olympia, trying to get bills passed, trying to, urge the state government, urge the governor, or urge the city council of Seattle and everyone to take climate action, to pass bills that would better the environment. Right now we're facing a lot of environmental struggles in the Pacific Northwest. We used to have thousands of killer whales. Now there are only 73. We used to have salmon runs that were just so, you could practically walk on top of the salmon. It was just so abundant. Now there are only like a handful of salmon that swim up the stream. And plus, with all the wildfires and ocean acidification, there's just a continual breakdown of the Pacific Northwest. So I was fighting as hard as I could to stop that. And on top of that, my family is from Colombia, South America on my mom's side, and I was getting messages, in the family group chat, if this is a Latino thing, but there's always like the family group chat on WhatsApp, and so they were sending pictures of like, you know, all the effects of fracking and the oil industry in their community, and then also my uncle in Colombia runs an organic farm called La Granja Patota, and there was just all the struggles with that and the organic farming, and then on top of that, the Amazon rainforest is also located, a large chunk of it is in Colombia, and there's massive deforestation. The current government is not helping the rainforest protectors or anything like that. So there was just all these issues building up, and I was doing as much as I could for almost like a year with no success, and then finally I decided, you know what, enough is enough. I have to take this a level further. So I posted on social media that I was going to start a youth climate march, and I asked who's with me. And I got a few people online who said that they'd like to join me. And so from there we just grew, and we organized this organization called 0 Hour, because we have 0 hours left to act on the climate crisis. This is 0 Hour to act on climate change. And so we had these massive marches about a year after I posted that, all over the world, which helped lay the groundwork and inspire Greta Thunberg and the current school strike for climate movement. And since then, we've been co-organizing in millions of the recent youth climate strikes with the coalition, which has seen millions of young people hit the streets in historic numbers. And we've organized several youth climate summits and events. And right now we're getting prepared to go on tour throughout the Midwest, March 20th through 30th, for our Vote for Our Future campaign, where we are turning young people out to the polls and making sure that climate change is the #1 issue for Americans, and talking about how the climate crisis intersects with all other issues. It doesn't exist separately from racism and poverty and sexism and everything else that we're trying to defeat in our society. The climate crisis is really the grand culmination of all our societal injustices that have been building up for centuries. It's a result of colonialism. It's a result of a lot of these other systems of consumerism, of everything like that. So that's really what we're fighting for. And on top of that, throughout my journey, I've also been I've been on a couple of speaking tours going around the world and around the country I'm still in high school right now, so I'm missing school to be here, but I've also been missing like months of school to do different speaking tours. And doing all those things, I realized that there are so many young people out there who want to do activism, who really want to get involved, who know that there's something in their community that needs to be solved, but they just don't know how. And like me, you know, I would have been an activist long before I was 14 if I had known how to, but no one teaches young people, no one gives us those skills. And so I decided, you know, I've been in this work for a long time, and I know so many people in this work, and so I put together a proposal for a book to be like the ultimate guide to being a young activist. And when I was 16, got a book deal for it. And so the book that I wrote is like an ultimate guide to being a young activist and organizer in today's world by a young activist. And so that is coming out June of this year. So I'm really excited, and that all of the hard work is paying off. But really what I'm here for is that I fight for my environment, my future, and the world, and I'm hopefully inspiring people along the way to do the same.
Okay, great. Okay, this is a little high, but we'll do it anyway. So I am a student at Cornell University right now, and I am a freshman there, so high school is not too far away from me. And I am studying business there. After studying a lot of engineering in my high school, I went to a school in New York City where engineering was the main focus, and I have a lot of background in programming, mechanical engineering, and kind of a really well-rounded sense of the whole engineering space. And my whole goal is to study business so that then I can apply my engineering background towards social entrepreneurship and create new solutions to the problems that we are having using my technical knowledge or my technical way of thinking. So a lot of what I'm working on right now is actually my 3D printed clothing line. So I actually launched this clothing line, and I worked on developing a technique where I could actually 3D print onto clothing and create something really interesting for engineers to wear to really express themselves. But more than just 3D printing, I love to teach students about engineering, and especially make 3D printing knowledge more accessible, because I firmly believe that there are not enough STEM education opportunities that are accessible, especially to underrepresented youth. And I think that it is my goal to really kind of create these modern workshops and provide them to these groups, which is why I'm actually doing a lot of 3D printing workshops where I teach people of all ages how to 3D print, and to make it even more fun, how to 3D print onto clothing. So doing a lot of that and making that education a lot more accessible in any which way that I can. And on top of that, a lot of what I do is supporting women in STEM, and especially female-run organizations that support other young women in STEM. So another fun fact is a good portion of the proceeds from the clothing line, 20% of our revenue, goes to all of these organizations, because I firmly believe that more female-run organizations and groups need support. So putting my money where my words are, that's a lot more of what I'm doing. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, Seda.
Hi, how you guys doing? Okay, that was weak. How you guys doing? Did everyone vote today? Okay. Hi, my name is Sarita Dahid. I'm actually from Salt Lake City. I grew up just down the street in South Salt Lake, so this is home to me. I came to the United States when I was 3 years old as a child refugee after the civil war in Somalia, and my family immigrated here for a better life and for a better future. What I do is I do poetry, a lot of poetry. I go around the world, not the world, I'll go around the nation reading poetry and inspiring the youth for tomorrow about literature and education and things that they can do. You know, a lot of people don't know that poetry is something that's in everyone's blood. Your favorite rapper is a poet, you know. There's so many avenues that you can use for self-expression. So I started doing poetry when I was around 12, 11 years old, and from there I started just performing at local coffee shops around here, like Sugar House Coffee just down the street. And I went from doing shows with 5 people to speaking in front of thousands and thousands of people, just because I knew that my story was important. I have a lot of different marginalized groups that I'm a part of. You know, I'm Black, I'm Muslim, I'm a woman, I'm a refugee, so just Oppression Olympics. So I really, thanks for laughing. I really knew that I had all these marginalized groups that I'm a part of, and our stories are so important. And how can we use our stories in a productive way to hit the mainstream media and to really work to spotlight the people in the background, the people with no voices. So I released an album just this year called Walking Stereotype. The name is also a joke because I'm basically a walking stereotype of so many different groups. And this album was just a spotlight of how so many different institutions are working against people of color, especially people from underrepresented groups. And that, you know, when you look at education and you look at poetry in schools, it's a bunch of like old white men, William Shakespeare. All these people are amazing to learn about, but we don't ever see ourselves in these history books or these literature books. So it's really important. So I worked at an after-school program teaching kids how to write poetry and figuring out how we can utilize our voices to really make a change and do valid representation. So that's what I do, and I'm a student at UC Berkeley studying journalism.
Thank you for those introductions. So next we have a set of questions that were written by the Citizen Diplomacy class here at Westminster College. I think we have a lot of the students here with us tonight. So we'll go through these list of questions, and then at the end we'll also have a chance for audience questions and participation as well. Thank you. So to start, let's start at the end. We'll start with Jamie and just work towards Karina. What led you to this level of involvement and participation in your field at such a young age?
I think desperate times call for desperate measures, in terms of the science. By the time I am old enough to hold any sort of political office, by the time I'm old enough to really be in power and have a control over laws, it's going to be too late to solve the climate crisis. Scientists are saying that we have roughly a decade to to completely transform our economy to a renewable energy economy and transform our current factory farming system to a sustainable agriculture system. And that all needs to happen. It's not like we have 10 years to wait until, okay, in 10 years, then we change. It's like within the next 10 years, that transformation needs to happen. So 10 years from now, we will have completely transformed our society. That's an incredibly, incredibly short timeline. And so I think, like I said, desperate times call for desperate measures. I've grown up and the climate crisis has always been a reality for me. I was born after 9/11, so not only has constant airport security always been a reality for me, but so has the fact that life as we know it on this planet and all the life systems that we know are unraveling, whether we like it or not, whether people care to admit it or not. And so growing up, it was always when I was planning my future with, growing up in Seattle, I was planning my future at school, and kids would be like, I want to do this when I grow up if climate change hasn't destroyed this by then. I want to see this place if it's still going to be around. And so I just grew up in a world full of ifs, and it's really, young people were having trouble seeing into the future because the climate change doesn't just cause, environmental destruction, but it's also the violence that people cause to each other when there's environmental desperation, when there's need. There's already a lot of the conflicts happening along the world are environmentally fueled. And so as the climate crisis gets worse and there's even a few degrees of warmth higher linked to higher cases of violence, and when people are desperate, they resort to scapegoating, genocides, things like that. So it was really troubling to me because I knew that environmental destruction, what scares me most about climate change isn't what the environment does to us, but what people do to each other when times are hard or when resources are scarce. And so that was just always a reality for me. And so, but I didn't know how to act on it. And that's, a big reason why I wrote the book is that I was just sitting there. I would do a school project and I would, maybe write an essay about it, but I was just sitting on all this fear and all this anxiety and I didn't know what to do. And so it really pushed me, it's not like one day I was not doing anything and then another day, boom, I had an international organization, was going on speaking tours and doing everything I could. It wasn't like that. I really started out just walking into a local community organization and being like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I was 14 at the time. I have no clue what I'm doing. How can I help? And then they give you a task. Help me set up this. Help me do that. We're going on a lobby day. Come along and help us hand out things to representatives. And little by little, you learn the field. I learned the field of climate action slowly but surely. I would go to these events, I would get involved, I would just volunteer myself. I don't know what I'm doing, I have no idea what this field is like, but I'm just going to try. And eventually, you put yourself out there enough, you see what's happening, and I saw a gap in the movement. I'm not a fan of starting things just to start something so you can say you started something for a resume. That's not what this work is about. And so after being in the climate world for about a year and really understanding the whole movement ecosystem fully, then I was like, there's a gap, there was not the school strike movement or any of this stuff happening at the time. And so I saw that gap and I was like, oh, there needs to be a big youth climate movement. There needs to be a space. 0 Hour is led by predominantly young women and young folks of color, mostly young women of color. And so there wasn't when you think of climate action, at the time before you thought of Al Gore, and no shade to Al Gore, he's been wonderful and supportive of the work I do, but you think of old white guy scientists holding a chart and being like, look at my carbon numbers, that's not entertaining, that's not interesting. And so really it was important to provide a space for people who you don't typically think of as climate people to be in that movement and really talk about it through a more intersectional lens, through a more human lens, through a lens of arts and culture to make it more fun and engaging. So really the way I got to this place, in a nutshell, is I just put myself out there, learned, and then little by little, I just it started to snowball. And then as I've been doing this more, it's just been snowballing faster and faster and faster. But there's nothing special about me or unique about me. I just got involved. I don't come from a rich family or a political family or a wealthy family or a famous family. It's just, I just put myself out there and stuff started to happen.
Can I get the question
Oh yeah. What led you to this? What led you to this level of involvement at such a young age?
I think that there was a distrust that I had with the education system from a young age. My family was not political as well, but my mother always used to turn on the news every single day after she came home from work, and me and my siblings used to just watch the news. And from there, I started to like watching the news, and I saw the same faces up there, the same groups of people talking about issues that they had no attachment to. And the same thing was happening in my education system. I would see textbooks with nobody that actually looked like me or making the textbooks, and a lot of the information I knew was kind of false. So I knew that I wanted to help with representation and changing the narrative that we see in media and the way that we teach people about things that are happening around the world. And I knew that I loved poetry, and the way that I got into poetry is my 8th grade teacher, my journalism teacher, who got me into loving journalism as well. He told me the only way that I would get an A in his class is if I performed at the talent show and read a poem, and it was terrifying, but I really put myself out there and I read a poem, and everything that happened ever since then have just been luck. There was a woman in the audience who asked me to do the same poem at another event, so I went to that event, and from there, and it was like, I would go into spaces, there'd be 5 people there, I would read my poem, and it was exhilarating. Those 5 people became 10 people, and the 10 people became 15, and so on and so forth, and that's led me to be speaking in front of the crowds that I have today. And every time when I walk up onto the stage, I have a pinch me moment. All this happened because my teacher, when I was 12 years old, forced me to read a poem at a talent show. And it really just shows that community is so important. I never do things because I want an end goal. I really just want my poetry to help inspire the next generation to become political, to focus on the news, to see what's happening, to make sure that they're being aware of the dynamics that are in politics, not just in Washington, D.C., but just locally. I've always been a person to go to city council meetings. Me and my siblings were part of the youth city council, where we just volunteered and just sat in on meetings and really just were a part of our community, because it's really important to be doing this national work. Someone has to be doing it, but local grassroots organizing is what I've really been passionate about. And just really showing the people of color that your voices are so important, and it might not be represented when you watch CNN or Fox, or when you open a textbook, or when you go on Twitter, but that's because you need to be pushing your narrative into those areas. So that's how I got involved at a young age, and every single day it's just a domino effect of more and more things that I've been able to do because I put myself out there towards negativity, but also towards positivity. And it really just shows that people really care about your voice and what you have to bring to the table. And if they don't let you come to the table, you bring a folding chair.
I think that for me, the biggest, I would say, combination would definitely have to be passion, and also seeing an opportunity for me to contribute something. And I have to say that for me, my work started when I was a freshman in high school, and when I took a mandatory class in 3D design and 3D printing, of course. So in there, I fell in love with the idea of 3D printing, because to me, it seemed like the gateway to engineering. You could build something out of nothing, and that really seemed like exactly what the world of engineering was like. You could make something and see it happen. And I just thought that was so beautiful and so powerful. And in addition to being powerful, I also saw it as an opportunity for me to climb up the social ladder, because at the end of the day, a career in STEM pays really well. And being the daughter of immigrants, I realized that this could be my chance to work towards financial security. And I realized that, for minority groups that don't have access to the STEM education, this could also be their ladder. But the thing is, they don't have access to that ladder. And I wanted to do everything I could to really provide them this opportunity, because I felt like I was in the same boat as them. I was lucky that I was able to attend a high school that offered me this education, but if I wouldn't have been in that high school, I would have never really gotten that opportunity to really start my whole STEM STEM experience and my own education. And I really wanted to give that back to the rest of the community and the youth that was really missing out on it. And I started kind of facilitating some workshops, whether it was teaching people how to code or teaching people how to build stuff. And I soon really quickly saw another gap, the fact that a lot of our current STEM workshops are really kind of boring and not engaging. I actually mentioned this to our other panelists here earlier, but I went to a conference not too long ago, and we were teaching kids about architecture by having them build houses out of spaghetti and marshmallows. And yes, that is fun, but is it really educational? Is it really engaging? I say no, because now our kids demand so much more from us, and they want something more engaging. And that's why I started on a journey to create 3D printing workshops that were for people of all ages, and 3D printing workshops that could engage girls specifically too, so that we can work on that gap and improving the representation going on there. And so seeing all these gaps and seeing that my passion was perfectly aligned within those gaps kind of helped me dedicate all of my focus in that area and kind of building this up and bringing as much education and as much opportunities as I could. And now I'm really lucky to say that I'm going to be doing a bunch of workshops all over the US thanks to all the grants that I've been able to get. So that's one thing that I'm super excited about.
Okay, I have to admit that I'm guilty of entertaining my kids with toothpicks and marshmallows, but I wish you were at my house. I'll send them to your workshop. Okay, so the next question is, have you ever had to deal with being written off because you're so young, and how did you combat and deal with that?
I think especially very early on, before I started my activism, before the March for Our Lives, and like I think that was like a turning point when youth activism began. Like it was like in vogue and cool now, and like with the climate strikes and everything happening, like I feel like now not just youth climate activism, but youth activism in general is taken a lot more seriously. I think ever since 2018, but before then, getting started, like it was pretty rare to receive praise or just even be seen as valid as a young activist. So I remember going to my state capital in Olympia and lobbying different politicians, and I would be testifying before these local bill committees, for or against a certain bill, and there would be these fossil fuel lobbyists who would literally like call me sweetie, get really grabby, get really like, oh, don't worry about it, sweetie, like we got this covered, it's so cute that you're doing this, but like it's okay, like I don't know why, and just like the most patronizing things. I don't know what it is with like, men having the need to like, whenever they're moving around a young woman, to like touch her lower back to move instead of just moving around or like grabbing shoulder. They were just like really grabby and very condescending and patronizing, and like the whole sweetie, honey, oh, you could do better at this, don't worry, we got it. Like that sort of thing was like all over in my initial local work. I would give speeches, like really tiny speeches to like rooms, rooms of just like a few people, and there would just be like this old guy who comes up and it's like, no, actually what you said was, he wasn't denying the facts of my speech, he was just giving me advice in a way that was not like constructive criticism or anything, but was just very like, clearly you shouldn't even be here, why am I listening to you, but masked in a more, I guess, subtle way, passive aggressive way. So I've dealt with a lot of that, and I guess like I still I think nowadays it's different, because now that youth climate activism and youth activism in general is something that the general media respects more. Now that patronization is slightly different, where someone will use a picture and tweet out, oh my God, it's so cute that these activists are doing this. But then when it comes to funding, when it comes to actual resource support, when it comes to actually lending a hand, suddenly they're gone. Suddenly, and these are people, I've met actual literal billionaires. I've sat at tables with billionaires who will just be like, oh, that's so nice that you're doing that, and it's like, great, my organization, we really need help to be able to do this project, and then they're like talking, I don't have enough money, you're literally a billionaire. What? Like, oh, we need to secure more funding. What funding? I'm like, oh my God. So there were just instances like these where there would be praise or, or kind of compliments hidden in it, or insults hidden in compliments, where it's just like, wow, you're so articulate, but like it's like I wouldn't be. Like they were expecting me to be dumb and not know things. So when I know things, it's like, oh wow, she can talk. That's and so there have just been things like that. I guess for me, being a lot of the hate, comes online. I guess it also comes from occupying a lot of different identities and being very open about them online. I'm Jewish, I'm Hispanic, I'm gay, and so there's just a bunch of different things that I occupy. So when I talk about these issues or talk about the climate crisis through the intersections of these issues, I will get really nasty hate comments that, telling me to go to a concentration camp, or that like Hitler missed a Jew, or like anti-gay slurs or sexist, jokes and things like that men feel okay sending me. And I screenshot them and I have them all in a folder called Crap Men Send Me. I have receipts. Someday I will deploy the folder, but right now it's just building up. But there are just things like that. I think people also feel especially bold online to attack activists. When I see male activists and like older activists, out speaking, what the critique that will come from them is, oh, your science isn't correct. Oh, it's like the content that they're talking about. But when I talk about something, it's, you're ugly, you're, this, insert whatever slur that they want, you're dumb. It's more about personal. And that's what comes when it's like young women, like they feel like as a young woman, people feel so entitled to just send me things all the time, all sorts of hate. And another thing is also like, people feel entitled to my time. So I will go to events when I know, and I've recently gotten the habit of asking my fellow like adults who are speaking at the event, are you getting paid for this? Because I've had instances where for the exact same amount of labor, they thought that they could get away without paying me, as if somehow I don't need the money, as if somehow, my labor isn't worth compensation, but theirs is. And so, I have to really advocate for, monetary funding for my organization, payment for myself, and just like a seat at the table a lot of times, and making sure that, I get a lot of people who are angry when I can't do something for them because they feel like entitled to my time and to my labor. And I know that if it was like an older man, that would never happen. So those are just some of the things, and I don't mean to like complain, because I know I have it better than like, a lot of people, but it's still something that I think fighting for an issue, such a hot button topic as like climate change, when you're a young woman and a young woman occupying all the identities that I do, it's like, it's just a whole lot of vitriol and hate that you just have to deal with, and just have to put on your blinders, like you're like on the horse of those carriages, and just keep your attention on the goal and just block out all the hate. So yeah.
Oftentimes there's like this misconception by the older generation that the younger generation, especially like Gen Z, have no idea what's going on in politics, which is not true. Like, I know that a lot of these movements have been spearheaded by young people because we pay attention to what's going on. We also pay attention to memes and top trends, but we also pay attention to what's going on in politics. I think we can be more than just one thing. And I've been in many, many rooms where people say, young people have no idea, you have not lived through this, you haven't lived enough, you have no worldly knowledge. But that's not true. We live through this every single day. A lot of these issues we see in the news and in politics affect people's lives every single day. Does it have an age limit? It's like, oh, you're 5, so immigration doesn't affect you right now. It does. If this child's an immigrant, then immigration affects every single thing that they do. So why can't they have a voice in immigration? And all that can be added to every other group. It's not an age limit that someone can finally be politically aware. It happens all the time. And we're trying to get even more young people out there and pre-registering to vote and getting into institutions to actually talk about the things they're talking about. I never was told what to do or how to do any of this stuff when I was a kid. It was just luck of the trade. It was me actively putting myself out there to different organizations and learning and exploring. And it's harder for young people that are from different backgrounds to get a seat at the table or to put their foot through the door than it is other young people that have different things lined up for them, So it's really important that young people are not just the tokenized youth. I was talking about this earlier, but you shouldn't just have a young person on your board as the young person. And anything that has to do with young people, you ask the young person. Why can't the young person on the board be like the treasurer or the vice president, or something that's actually participating, doing things. Oftentimes people are like, okay, you're a young person, you're in charge of social media. Do some tweets, use some hashtags. But that's not just what we do, We are actively engaged in lobbying. We're actively engaged in pre-registering to vote, actually going out there and doing grassroots mobilization. And it's kind of a backhand compliment when you want a young person on the board, but you want them to be in charge of the selfies, So it's like important to really have young people at the table, but also be utilizing their skills and teaching them and fostering their growth into the different areas that they can be in. And I feel that, politics does not have an age limit, does not have an age gap. You can be so politically engaged and be like 7, or you can be like 60 and finally start to become politically engaged. So it's just about how much resources you're given, and young people are like really leading the movements and are going to change the world for the better.
Yeah, adding on to what Seda said, young people, we are super hungry for opportunities, and we want to learn more, but we never get the chance to, because we're often put in charge of social media or selfies. And it's kind of ridiculous because, yes, I may not know about treasuring, but what about me having the position and learning about it once I'm there? And yes, I'll make mistakes, but everyone needs to start somewhere. And I think that's one really crucial thing, because I know for me, even when I was in high school, I was hungry to learn by doing and actually kind of jump in and just learn and try it out. But I never really got the opportunity because everyone was always like, sorry, we don't have a program set up for that. You're a little too young. Call us when you're 18. And then when I did turn 18, they were like, let us know when you're in college, or when you're like a senior in college, or when you have a master's degree. So, it's really hard to get the opportunities to really learn and be taught, which is incredibly unfortunate because, as many of you might know, we as the young generation are really on top of our game, and we know what's going on, and we do want to work hard, and we want to work for it, but we're not really getting the chance to. And I think that's one of the barriers that I've definitely faced a lot. And on top of that, one huge barrier that I've personally faced being a woman in STEM is being a woman in STEM. There are nearly not enough women at all, not enough women educators, not enough women and young girls. I mean, I graduated high school with 25 boys in my engineering class and 5 girls. So even now, the problem is still pretty big. And mind you, this was in a public school in New York City. So the problem is still there, and it's still big. And along with having such a different kind of gender dynamic comes a bunch of different problems, whether that be imposter syndrome that young women face, whether that be biases that our young men still have about what it is that women can do and what women can't do. And even the biases that we as women have about what we can do, because, being told so long that, hey, you are not really meant for engineering, and never seeing representation, it kind of tells us that, hey, yeah, maybe we aren't the best, maybe I should just trust the guy over there, and, he probably has a better job than I do. And I think that's always been a barrier, but like I say, it always comes down to owning it and realizing that for women that we are strong and we are good at what we do, and taking a step back and saying, you know what, no, I am a good engineer, I'm good at what I do, and I do not need to be modest about it, because in reality, men would probably never be modest about it.
Okay, thank you. So I want to ask really quickly, you all just talked about kind of these barriers you've overcome over the last few years that you've been working in your different fields. So what one word would you use to describe the greatest future barrier to you, the barrier to your success, if you have one word for that? I'll give you a second to think about it.
I have a good one. Definitely myself. Should I talk more about why?
I'll give you 3 sentences. How about that?
Okay.
Long sentences.
I get in the way of myself all the time, whether it's picking at the nitty-gritty or just being so focused on the perfect details that I don't see the bigger picture, and I break myself down because of it, which is not good and slows me down and makes me inefficient, and it's something that I'm always trying to work on.
I think the biggest fear that I have for the future is, one word, institutions. And that has to do with, I can give 3 sentences, right?
Yeah, go for it.
That has to do with how constantly institutions have been playing a role in belittling and pushing back the narrative of people of color. When you look at academia, when you look at Hollywood, when you look at just politics, there's a lot of institutions pushing back, and that's really scary, but it's also very hopeful to see what we can push back as well.
I really say climate change because, I have so many dreams for the future outside of being a climate activist. Everyone just sees me as like the climate girl, the youth activist, but it's like I do this work because I have to, because my generation's life depends on it. But there are so many dreams I have in terms of, writing and maybe, getting into Hollywood or different things that I want to do in my life that because of the environmental catastrophes and the increase of disease and violence and all of these things that people don't even think of as climate change but actually intersect. So I'd say the climate crisis and everything that comes with it, all of the institutions and all of the, the corrupt responses by government when things get hard, the rise of totalitarianism that comes with ecological depletion. I think there are so many dreams that I have that I'm scared that the climate crisis and everything that comes with it are gonna not just make it that I can't achieve my dreams, but make it that all of the young people can't achieve their dreams. And that's something really scary and unfair.
Okay, so last question. I think we have a mixed group here. We have, young adults and older adults. And so I'm curious about mentors along the way. How can the older adults here do a better job mentoring younger people, or who was an important mentor to you?
So I've only been able to achieve the success I have because of the mentors along the way who have believed in me and given me opportunities. This past September, I was able to testify before Congress and really have my voice heard. Some parts of my testimony went viral, and I got to do many interviews in the mainstream media about it, and it was just a great way to highlight, the climate crisis and everything like that. But I would never have gotten that opportunity to testify before Congress if it hadn't been for a mentor of mine named Natalie Mabane, who gave my name. She's a environmental lobbyist for 350.org, and she gave my name to, because she believed in me so much, she gave my name to the congressional committee. And there are so many adults who have access to institutions and spaces, and because of the adults along the way who have given me access to those spaces, I've been able to use my voice. And I wouldn't, Natalie Mabane, she's an incredible mentor to Zero Hour as well. I can't count the amount of times where I spent hours over the phone handling things with her, working on stuff with her. There are a few, and it was really incredible. She's an amazing role model for so many of the girls on our team, as a Caribbean Black woman whose family is on the front line in terms of the climate crisis, or not family, but her home country of Trinidad and Tobago, her family's country. And so having mentors who the members of our organization can see ourselves in, and really she understands, what it's like to be a woman in the environmental field, and so she will help us and mentor us and coach us. And having those, youth activism doesn't mean only young people and we hate adults. It's really about intergenerational work. And so if it wasn't for Natalie and so many of the other adults along the way, I wouldn't be able to do this work because, we have school, we have life, we have family obligations. We just need the help and support. And this movement, climate, but also all of the movements that we work in, they're for everyone. And so, there's also been times where when Zero Hour, we were organizing our different mobilizations and we were all living in a house together, some of the parents came together to help prepare food for us, because if somebody didn't feed us, we would all just work ourselves to death and starve. And so someone had, people think it's menial, oh yeah, okay, feeding, cooking the food, whatever, that's not important. But it's crucial. If we're not fed, we can't do the work that we do. And so some of the moms got together and made my co-executive director's mom made us some delicious Indian food, and we sustained ourselves on that. And so it can be as big as Natalie, who helped me testify before Congress, and works in the nitty-gritties of our organizations day to day, or a parent who cooks food for an event. Like, that's really important. So there's just so many ways where people it's a lot of work. So even lending like care, support, being the person who takes pictures of your children at events or things like that, like there's so many ways that adults can support youth, and this is not about pitting generations against each other, it's about intergenerational organizing and healing. So, you know, it doesn't make my movement any less genuine of a youth movement to say that we've had a lot of adults support us along the way, and we're not ashamed of that.
I guess I was like the weird kid in high school because all my mentors are my teachers, and teachers don't get enough credit, so shout out to all the teachers out there. Because I would not be where I am today if my 8th grade journalism teacher didn't force me to be in the talent show, or if my 10th grade English teacher didn't let me come into her room and vent about my life, or my 11th grade, I just keep going on and on, because all of them have played an important role in shaping me, because the outside world doesn't look like me, you know, the news doesn't look like me, politics doesn't look like me, but my teachers have showed me that I can do amazing things in the world, that I can break down any barriers, you know, cross any mountain. And I think that it's important I was the kind of kid that really flocked to my teachers because my mother, she worked so many hours, you know. I have a lot of siblings, they were doing their own thing, so shout out to my siblings. But I really did look at my teachers as my role models in life, and not just for political issues, for issues in general. I remember one of my teachers drove me to a protest one day because I didn't have a ride, and she watched me speak, and it was an incredible moment. And it's things like that adults can do for young people to just help them, you know, lend an ear, lend an arm, and really show them that, you know, you might not be my direct child, but I can help you in the future. And a lot of other mentors that I've had are like amazing women of color that, you know, can't spotlight what they're doing in the news, or can't spotlight what they're doing in activism because they fear, you know, being killed, being arrested, and worse, because a lot of these institutions don't like activism when it comes from communities that look like mine. There's like a really scary statistic about like how many Black women who are in activism end up dying randomly. So it's really important to know that there's people that can't showcase, that can't be sitting on panels talking about what they've done, because if they do, they fear death, they fear incarceration and more. They might be undocumented, so they can't even come up here and speak, to fear deportation. And all of them have been, you know, trailblazing this industry for so many people. And I think it's really important to spotlight the activists that have really stood up against, you know, actual treason, against death, against everything, and use their voices to really help us now utilize our voices in changing the narrative.
Yeah, just like everything Saida and Jamie just said, I think that, you know, you as adults are in positions of power right now. You know, slowly as, you know, we grow older, we're going to take over those positions, and then our kids are going to take over those positions. And, you know, you guys hold power, whether it be a simple car ride or it be something like taking a young person under your wing. And I think, yes, it takes a lot of energy and effort to take a young person under your wing, whether that be through coaching or through actually pushing them forward into opportunities and doors. It does take a lot, but I think it's come to a point where it's part of your duty as adults to kind of help us get to that level and help us kind of achieve what change that we need to achieve to make the world a better place. And I think it's kind of a sort of system that we have to have go on, where mentorship is just crucial to young adults, and crucial also to adults to kind of watch out for us and how we take control of the future, because at the end of the day, with your help and your guidance and all of your support, we can do so much better and so much more. And I truly believe that I wouldn't be nowhere near where I'm at today if not for the adults that have pushed me into the doors that have really made a difference. I mean, I am currently the first freshman in one of my business classes, first ever freshman to take the class. And that wouldn't have happened if not for a professor that took me under her wing and said, you know what, you belong here and you need to take this class because it'll benefit you. And you know, it's little things like this that, yes, they take a lot of effort on maybe your end, but they will make a big difference, because not only does it give us an opportunity, it also shows us that you believe in us. And I think that's very important, especially for young people, to show us that, you know, we do have somebody to believe in us that isn't just our parents. We do work that is important, and that other people see it's important too.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap up this portion of the program and open it up to audience questions. So if you have a question you'd like to ask the whole panel or individual panelists, just raise your hand and we have people with microphones that can come over to you. So we have one right here.
A question for Jamie Margolin on the climate crisis. Did you inspire Governor Jay Inslee, or did he inspire you? And the same thing with respect to Greta Thunberg.
Well, Inslee, I'm actually on a lawsuit suing Inslee currently. I forgot to mention this. I'm on a lawsuit currently, so right now I think Inslee was not an inspiration for me to get involved in climate at all. He is an example of the politicians who will talk great about climate, but when it comes to actual policies, when it comes to the actual carbon levels in Washington State, when it comes to the actual fact that we are continuing to build tons of new fossil fuel plants in Washington State on indigenous land against the consent of the indigenous folks of the state, he hasn't really raised his voice to stop that, and he'll go on, you know, he ran for president briefly and was like, climate, climate, but then the people in his state, the climate activists in his state were like, okay, whatever you say, sir. Like, at home, we see the effects, so at home we're like, you talk nice, but other than that, like, your speeches are good, like, good job, but like, other with the actual, and so I'm actually on a lawsuit with Our Children's Trust. It's just an organization that helps young people sue our governments to hold them accountable for climate disaster, because we have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, inalienable rights, in the founding documents of this country, and those are being denied because you can't have life, liberty, and happiness without clean air, clean water, and a livable climate. And in the Washington State Constitution, there's this thing called the Public Trust Doctrine, which says all of the natural resources of the state are, you know, they belong to the next generation to inherit. But right now, with the way everything is going, with the way the current government, Department of Ecology, and Governor's Office, the way they're allowing this new fossil fuel infrastructure, those rights are all being violated. So I'm actually, with 12 other young people, we're currently in a legal battle with Inslee, not him specifically, but the whole state government and Inslee as well, and his Department of Ecology over their, you know, lack of true action on climate. So there was I didn't really inspire him, and he didn't inspire me. It's not like, it's a very, it's an interesting relationship. We're suing him. In terms of Greta Thunberg, I did help inspire her. She wrote the foreword to my book. So she talks a little bit about this, but I wasn't the sole inspiration. 0 Hour wasn't the sole inspiration. She was also inspired by the Parkland students in the March for Our Lives in terms of the whole, you know, skipping school idea, like the school walkouts, and then also the 0 Hour March. She was initially going to organize like a 0 Hour sister march in Sweden, but then decided to school strike instead. So she was aware of the work that we were doing, and from the foreword that she wrote for my book and from my conversations with her, you know, it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't like 0 Hour was the sole thing that made her strike, but it was one of the dominoes that pushed her to do it. And we did come before her and did lay the groundwork, but like now we work together, and I'm really happy for everything that she's been able to accomplish, and our movements do work together. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Do you have another question?
I think this is primarily for Karina. What impediments do you see to reducing that 5-to-1 ratio of male to females in STEM disciplines?
Yeah, so I think achieving that change is going to be very hard. I talk to a lot of my friends who are in STEM, who are minority groups in STEM, so not just women, but also Black and Latina populations. There are very few numbers of those people as well. And I think that a lot of the problems that lie in this whole situation that we have going on is this change for pushing more people into STEM is mostly by corporations who are funding movements like Girls Who Code, who are funding Black Girls Rock or Black Girls Code, and all these really great programs. They're all funded by these corporations. But if we look at these corporations, all these corporations really care about are their numbers. Because when all these Black women and all these women and people, minority people, go into the workforce to work for a STEM career, they actually don't get the support that they need. They don't get the infrastructure, and all of these issues around bias and imposter syndrome and all these other situations go on in the workplace. And even more importantly, these issues still go on in the classroom and still go on kind of in the bigger STEM world. And that all kind of goes back to the lack of representation, the lack of female STEM teachers. I've actually never had a female STEM teacher in my whole life. I was lucky enough to be a female STEM teacher for an elementary school, and I can firmly say that me being a female STEM teacher changed the way the culture was in the classroom. The boys were super respectful of the girls and even encouraged the girls to grow and to learn, which I've never seen before in my classrooms where I was taught. And I think that that is something huge. And I think there are a bunch of issues with kind of fixing that barriers, but it all comes down to a cultural shift. That starts with us actually caring about all these people that go into STEM and actually talking to them and figuring out what they need to solve the issue. Hope that answers your question.
So we have a question right here now.
Hi, I brought my 13-year-old daughter with me this evening, Eve. And Eve, we just moved from the UK last summer. She's really keen to get involved, and so I take her to events like this, and we've got her involved in the UN Utah chapter for the youth. But my question is, do you have any advice for my 13-year-old daughter, Eve, as far as how she can get more involved, or any comments that if you were talking to yourself at 13, what you would say to yourself?
Well, hello Eve, thank you for coming. I think that it's amazing that you're here and that you've taken the first step. And this can be for everyone that has this question. I think that although us on this panel, we have really good credentials, you know, she wrote a book, she's making a clothing line, I wrote an album. You don't need to have these huge monumental things to be an activist. It's something as simple as, you know, going to a city council meeting, going to a school board meeting, you know, teaching people how to stay involved, making sure you're involved in your community, educating yourself about different laws. It's something as simple as that could take, you know, 10 to 15 minutes out of your day that really go a long way when we look at the institutions and the way we interact with the world. Although it's amazing to be a front runner in an international or national topic, you don't need to be doing those things to be an activist. You could be simply a community member that goes and rallies around community problems and sees that, you know, this is something my community doesn't have, so I'm going to try to advocate for it. Finding a politician that you really like and, you know, phone banking for them, putting posters up for them, going door to door for them. It's really important that, you know, we try to make sure that activism is inclusive for all people. Anybody, you know, able-bodied people to disabled-bodied people, everybody can have a say in changing the narratives, and you shouldn't be afraid, because I know when I started I was your age, and it was scary to know that people can hate you for the things that you have to say. We live in a very polarized society where, you know, one group doesn't want to talk to another group, and it's important to know that, you know, you're important and you're valid, and everything that you have to bring to the table is important, but just you have to put the fear aside. and really put yourself out there. Maybe join a group, make a group at your school. I know clubs are a really good way to get involved. Be friends with your politicians, call them, make sure they know you. It's something as simple as just staying informed that really can change the narrative.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, I think it's very important to remember that, at the end of the day, we are teens. We do like Netflix. We have normal lives. I can guarantee you that. I have friends. We all have friends, and we are regular people. And I know it might seem kind of like, oh wow, we're putting these people on a pedestal, and we can't really achieve what they're at, but you really can, because the only thing that we are really good at doing is pursuing our passion and pursuing our ideas. And I think that if you are able to find your passion and really, really pursue it and dedicate yourself to it, you'll be able to achieve what we have and probably even more. So
I was also going to add, just take what you're good at and then apply it to a cause. So if you're an artist, if you like to dance, if you like STEM, if you like whatever, for example, using the example of the climate movement needs artists, needs scientists, needs people who, even if you're physically strong, if you're good at manual labor, if you're good at whatever, you can apply something that you're good at and apply it to a cause. You can come up to an organization and say, I'm really good at drawing. Do you need someone to design your next poster for your event? I'm really good at architecture. Do you need someone to help you build a prototype for this or whatever? So just take what you're good at or what you think is fun, and you can apply that to a cause.
any more questions?
Any more questions? Oh, right here in the front. Thank you. This is probably more personal. How are your families dealing with the ups and downs, and especially when you're still in high school, you two are in college. I just wonder how the dynamics of your families and your siblings, is there any problems with doing so much at this young age in your life?
There really is. I've recently, my dad is in the audience right now. Hey, Dad. But I think for me, a lot of it is that I really just don't get to spend a lot of time with them. Most of the travel I travel alone. So I will be gone from home for extended periods of time. And then another thing is that, sometimes my relationship with my parents change because they end up having to, I get so many requests for different events like these or media or things like that, that they have to serve as I'm at a point where I've reached a point in my activism where I'm at a level where I get a lot of these requests, but not at a level where I found management or anything like that. So they have to kind of serve as informal managers, and so our relationship changes where it's less oh, let's talk about father-daughter stuff, and it's we have this event tomorrow, be sure to pack this, blah, blah, blah. And so then it's weird because then it's oh, your parents are kind of stepping in as temporary managers, and so that's a weird relationship. And fighting over my calendar, oh, when does she have time, and things like that. And so, and requests just keep coming in, and then it's also just, I just, with friends and family, I don't really have a lot of time to be there with them. When I'm at home, I'm hunkered down in front of my computer doing emails or catching up on homework or doing all these things. And I think the downside to all this work is that I haven't found a balance yet where I can fully be a person, because I'm just always working, and so it's kind of difficult because I don't really have time to hang out with them or just, be a daughter. I'm just constantly in a position of work at all times, and it's not really a healthy position I'm in right now. I think I do need to find a better balance. But, initially, the thing is that they couldn't have foreseen it, because it didn't start out one day I was going to do this, and then the next, boom, our lives change. But slowly but surely your lives change to the point where you look back at now and you look back at 2 years ago, and it's a complete different whole lifestyle, and just juggling things and different, travel and speeches and media and stuff, and there are times where my dad has to take a day off work because someone's coming to film and he doesn't want me to be alone with a bunch of strange men with cameras, so I have to and so he has to adapt his work schedule. And then my mom, she wishes that she could spend more time going to college or moving out next year, and so my mom is always saying, I feel like I've lost my little girl, because, and it's really sad because my little cousins, I've had to turn down a lot of fun family things for less fun activism things. So 2018, when 0 Hour had our initial youth climate marches, I had the opportunity of potentially going to spend some time with my family in Colombia. And instead of getting fed empanadas by people who love me, I was marching in the pouring rain in front of Capitol Hill, chanting until my throat was sore for climate justice. And you know, it would have been a lot, and then I got sick because I was cold and drenched, and it was super rainy for our march, and it was draining. And so instead of, you know, being with my family and eating delicious Colombian food, I was out there protesting. And my little cousin, and I had to like turn down different family events because I had pre-booked myself or was contractually obligated to do something for someone. And my little cousin told my aunt, you know, it's sad that Jamie picked her work over her family, and she like said that, and then my aunt told me, and I was like, I had like a existential crisis of like, I don't want my little cousins to think of me this way, and it's really sad because they're like, I'm an only child, so they're like my little sisters. And so there's been a lot of frayed relationships, I think, that I've had to navigate, that I want to repair, or at least try to find time to be a human and not a work robot, because that's been really difficult.
Everything that Jamie said holds pretty accurate. I definitely think that Jamie does a lot more than I do in terms of workload. But I've definitely I've always strived to find a good balance, even though realistically that if you ask my parents or my friends or anybody, they'll say that, oh yeah, no, Karina's all about her work and that's her priority, which is fairly true for most of us. But one thing I did like to add, in my case in particular, my parents don't really speak English, so explaining to them what I'm doing is very difficult, and also getting them to understand why I'm traveling so much, because to them it's like, you're traveling for a day just to speak somewhere? Like, what are you doing? You know? So it's hard for them to kind of understand the whole point of what I'm trying to do. But luckily they've still been super supportive. So I think that's another kind of difficult and significant kind of idea, as a kind of thing that I had to give up and work on to fix with my family too. So.
One last question.
Really? Yeah.
I think I'm loud enough.
Okay, she's gonna yell.
And this is for the panel. How do you support each other? There are a lot of youth activists now doing a lot of work. How do you find ways to connect with each other and build each other out?
Okay, let me just repeat the question really quick. It was, how do you support each other and how do you reach out and build each other up?
Yeah, I think this is a very great question. And I think I can relate this back to my STEM experience. Seeing so few women in STEM, I know how important it is to support other women and other people doing great things. And you know, earlier today we were all kind of talking about how much work we do and how we try to kind of keep our mental health in balance. And I think one really important thing is to always kind of be there for each other and give each other advice, and always just support and kind of cheer each other on. And yes, we may not have the time to really kind of cheer each other on and do all these things and kind of be there like we would really want to. But I think even in the case of all of us being here for these past 24 hours, being here together, we've all kind of talked and gotten along really well together and kind of been able to support each other and offer some advice and just be super kind of sisterly about the way that we do a lot of things, and just kind of encouraging each other to stay strong, keep doing what we're doing, because at the end of the day, it is hard and it is a lot. So I think that's definitely one of the ways that we try to support each other in our own way.
I think now it's more important than ever to be a community and to be united. There's a lot of people that are working against us in different industries. So it's always good to know that your fellow youth are there for you and are going to support you, and it doesn't even matter, it can be intergenerational. There's a lot of different policies and the different things that people are rallying for, like police brutality, climate change, reform in so many different industries. And I think it's really important to support each other when there's a huge crisis happening in a particular industry. I know that it's important to not just be single-issued people. And so if you are an activist or you're interested in, let's say, voting reform, but you know there's a huge crisis happening, like let's say the border crisis, you show up and you show out for those people that are rallying against that particular injustice. I think that all of our issues are very intertwined, so everything has to do with one another. And it really sucks to be like a person that says, I only care about this issue, and nothing else. It's as youth and as young people and as people in general that are like politically aware, we should be showing out for people that are rallying for things that we care about as well, but we are not completely invested in. And that is showing a diversity in thought, a diversity in practice, and supporting people's movements and seeing that, okay, I know my movement is really hard and I know that it's really taxing on me, so it's probably just as hard as you and your movement, so I'm gonna come to the protest, I'm gonna help, I'm gonna see if you need anything, I'm gonna help on social media by platform, and there's so many different ways we can utilize one another, each other's thoughts, each other's assets, and really make sure that all of our different organizations and our different things that we rally for are kind of intersectional.
Jamie, do you want to answer?
Oh, in terms of how to support each other, I really think just being real. Like for me, I've been struggling a lot with like mental health and like trying to find a balance, and like, it's difficult when, your life is kind of planned, at least like the next year for me is like planned in terms of events and things where it's like I can't find time for rest, and I can't, and it's easy, with social media to go down a rabbit hole of like comparing myself to other people or feeling bad about yourself. And I was just recently talking to Karina, and she was like, uplifting me and saying, hey, it's gonna be okay, and giving me advice and things like that, but you can't get to that place if you're not real with people. So I guess like the way you support each other is just, bringing the filters down and just, having a real conversation that's not like performative of like, oh yeah, everything's great, everything's fine, I'm thriving, if you're really not. And I think just like that one-on-one human connection with people who know what it's like for me, and just to remind me to treat myself like a human, because my default is to treat myself like a workhorse of just like, okay, this is what I have to do. I'm going to churn out my to-do list until I drop, and having people that I know that can just talk to me human to human and, push me to take care of myself or do things like that. Like, or even just you feel a lot better just venting over the phone with someone who knows what it's like. And, sometimes just a good, well-meaned complaining to someone who's in the same space as you, or being within your own community. Like sometimes, like me, like I hold a lot of different identities where, I'm friends with like people of all backgrounds, but sometimes it's nice to be with your own community. Like for me, like if I'm with, just a group of people in the LGBT community, for example, to just like be together where you don't have to explain yourself to anyone, or you kind of just look at each other and like you feel. And I know that goes for a lot of different minority communities where when you're all in a room together, you can just kind of telepathically like you get it because you're all in that same boat. So taking time also to be with people who get you, whether they're from the same identities, whether they're, from a same life background or a same country that your family's from or whatever, and just kind of taking the time. It's not bad to seek out that communities. It doesn't mean that you don't love to spend time with all different kinds of communities. It's just sometimes you need to be with people who get it, and that's okay. And so I've been trying to, seek out those communities and just, just exhale. And also sometimes just like a good, another way we support each other is by, for example, online, there are so many people who leave so many horrible things under activist comments that, I take the time, if I'm going through Instagram, I gassed up all my fellow activists. I'm like, oh my God, you're amazing, you're doing great. And just leaving those positive messages when I know that they get a bunch of bad messages too, just reminding them there are people out there that are rooting for them, and just publicly showing up, showing my support, not just tweeting about something also, but if, like Saida said, if there's a protest and you can go to it, don't just like tweet about it, but like show up and be, a body in the room to really show that. I know what it's like to organize an event and not have a lot of people show up, and that really sucks, and it's really draining, and it's really like, it's like, oh, I put in all this hard work for nothing. So to be there and show up and be like, well, at least I came out here for you, that's a great way to show support. but overall just human-to-human connection and keeping it real.
Thank you. Well, thank you to our panelists. Let's give them one last round of applause.